And as Chris Mitchell reports, some experts fear the Dead Sea could be drying up. Take a look.
Imagine standing on the cracked, salty shores of the Dead Sea, the lowest point on Earth, where the air smells like desolation and the water's so salty it stings. For thousands of years, this place has been a graveyard of water, silent, still, utterly lifeless. No fish, no reeds, just a barren mirror under a scorching desert sun. But something's happening here, something no one saw coming. Fresh pools are forming in the jagged wounds of sinkholes, clear water sparkling in the middle of this wasteland. And in that water, fish, living, breathing, swimming fish. It's as if the land is waking up, whispering secrets from ancient prophecies. I'm Chris Mitchell, and today we're diving into a story that might just rewrite science, history, and maybe even the future. Let's go back 2,600 years. A prophet named Ezekiel, exiled far from home, saw a vision so wild it sounded impossible. He spoke of waters flowing into the Salt Sea, what we now call the Dead Sea, turning its toxic brine into a sanctuary teeming with life. Fish would swim in its depths, trees would grow along its banks, bursting with fruit every month. He heard these words, "Wherever the river flows, everything will live." For centuries, people read this as piety, a metaphor for spiritual renewal, because the Dead Sea, it was the opposite of life. 10 times saltier than the ocean, its shores crusted white with minerals, its waters a symbol of judgment. Nothing could survive here. Or so we thought. Fast forward to today. The Dead Sea is in trouble. The Jordan River, its lifeline, has been diverted for farms and cities. Factories have been pulling minerals from its waters for decades. Every year, the shoreline shrinks, leaving behind cracked earth where beaches once were. Resorts that buzzed with tourists now stand empty, their signs faded, their windows staring blankly at a receding horizon. Sinkholes, hundreds of them, have torn open the ground, some small, others big enough to swallow roads, buildings, even orchards. It feels like the land is collapsing, exhaling its last saviors, last breath. But in the middle of this slow death, something miraculous is happening. In those sinkholes where salt once ruled, fresh water is collecting. Not rainwater that disappears in the heat. This water stays. It deepens. And beneath its surface, scientists have found fish. Healthy, thriving fish darting through waters that should kill them. In a place that's been dead for millennia, life is stirring. Scientists are stunned. Some say underground springs might be breaking through, carrying fresh water from deep aquifers. Others talk about ancient channels opening up, but none of these theories fully explain it. The Dead Sea should be too hostile for this. Locals whisper in awe, calling it a sign. For those who know Ezekiel's prophecy, it feels like more, like a promise carved in ancient scrolls is coming to life. This place has always been a wonder, the lowest point on Earth, 1,400 feet below sea level, where you can float without trying, where people have come for centuries seeking healing in its mineral-rich waters. But now that wonder is fading, or is it transforming? The shrinking shoreline and abandoned resorts tell a story of loss. Yet these pools, these fish, tell a story of something else. Could this be the start of Ezekiel's vision? A river, healing the Salt Sea, bringing life where death reigned. And if this is happening, what's next?
Let's go back to Ezekiel's prophecy, recorded in chapter 47 of the scroll bearing his name. He saw a river flowing from the threshold of a temple, cutting eastward through the parched desert like a lifeline, emptying into the sea we now call dead. As the water spread, the impossible happened. The Salt Sea was healed. Fish filled its depths, swarming like in a thriving coral reef. Trees grew along its banks, bearing fruit every month, their leaves evergreen, never withering. The prophet heard these words echoing in his mind. When they enter the sea, the water there becomes fresh. Wherever the river flows, everything will live. For centuries, scholars and believers read this as a metaphor, a beautiful symbol of spiritual renewal, of hearts washed clean. Because the Dead Sea, it was beyond repair, a geological dead end, a place where life couldn't possibly take root. But standing here today, on these crumbling shores, feeling the hot desert wind on your face, watching fish flash silver in the sunlight, it's hard to dismiss the echo. This isn't a man-made canal from the Red Sea or a sudden flood from the Jordan. It's quiet, subtle, almost hidden, sneaking up on us like a secret. Yet for those who know the prophecy, who feel it in their bones, it's unmistakable, a sign that something massive is stirring. Another prophet, centuries later, picked up the thread. His name was Zechariah. He stood in a broken Jerusalem, surrounded by returning exiles, their sandals still dusted with the ashes of captivity. The city's walls were scarred, its temple half-built, a dream unfinished. Yet Zechariah spoke of a future so radical, so earth-shaking, it defied the dry, cracked reality before them. He declared that one day, living waters would flow out from Jerusalem, half toward the eastern sea, the Dead Sea, and half toward the western sea, the Mediterranean. In summer and in winter, these waters would never cease, unstoppable by drought or season. A river flowing in two directions across mountains and deserts? Impossible by any natural standard. Physics would scoff at the idea. But Zechariah's vision wasn't bound by geography or science. It was a declaration of God's renewing presence, reaching into the most lifeless, forgotten corners of the earth.
In Scripture, water is never just water. It's a sign of cleansing, of rebirth, of divine power breaking into our messy, ordinary world. For Israel, a spring could mean the survival of an entire generation, life hanging on a trickle. A dry season could spell doom, wiping out crops, herds, hope. So when Zechariah spoke of living water, he was talking about life unending, a flow that no drought, no dam, no human interference could ever stop. And now, in 2025, when fish swim near the Dead Sea shores and reeds bend in desert winds for the first time in millennia, it feels like Ezekiel and Zechariah are speaking directly to us, their voices echoing across the ages, colliding in real time. To understand why this moment hits like a thunderbolt, we need to remember what the Dead Sea once was, before it earned its grim name. Long before it was called dead, this valley was alive, vibrant, teeming with possibility. Genesis 13 describes it as lush and well-watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the fertile lands of Egypt. Streams fed fertile fields, quenching the thirst of the soil. Trees shaded the banks of the Jordan, their branches heavy with fruit and promise. It was a paradise, a place where life thrived. But that promise was shattered, violently, irrevocably. Within this very region stood Sodom and Gomorrah, cities that, according to Scripture, had abandoned righteousness, spiraling into corruption and rebellion. When judgment fell, fire rained from the sky like meteors of wrath. The land trembled, quaking in fury. What had been a paradise was transformed into a salt basin, lifeless, harsh, unforgiving. For millennia, the Dead Sea has carried that legacy, a scar on the earth. Its very name tells the story. Dead. No fish, no reeds, no life. Just a still, salty mirror under a blazing sun, a symbol of what happens when a people turn from the God who gave them life, choosing death instead. But here's the thing. The God of the Bible isn't just a judge. He's a redeemer. He restores what's lost, rebuilds what's broken, breathes life into ashes. If this sea once reflected judgment, could it now be reflecting mercy? Could these pools, these fish, be the first ripples of a far greater restoration? A sign that grace is flooding back in, washing away the salt of the past? Ezekiel's prophecy starts with the heart,
not the land. In chapter 36, God promises, "I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will give you a new heart and a new spirit." This is the rhythm of God's restoration. First the heart, then the land. An inside-out transformation. We've seen part of this unfold in our own time. In 1948, after centuries of exile, scattered across the globe, persecuted, wandering, the Jewish people returned to their homeland. Israel was reborn. The Hebrew language, dormant for ages, came alive again, spoken in markets and streets. Cities rose from ruins, skyscrapers piercing the sky where sand once blew. Deserts bloomed, irrigated fields turning brown to green, orchards sprouting where nothing grew. The world watched as prophecy stepped from parchment into reality, unfolding in headlines and history books. And now, the land itself seems to be stirring. Springs bubbling up in forgotten valleys, the Jordan River shifting its course, and fish swimming in the Dead Sea. It's as if God's writing the same story twice, once in the soul of a people, etched into their resilience, and once in the soil of the earth, carved into its awakening.
Skeptics dismiss biblical prophecy as poetry or myth. Nice stories, but not real. But history tells a different tale, one that's hard to argue with. Take Ezekiel's prediction about the city of Tyre in chapter 26. He said many nations would come against it like waves, that its walls would be broken down, its stones, timber, and soil thrown into the sea, scraped clean. Centuries later, in 332 BC, Alexander the Great marched toward Tyre. The city had moved to an island fortress, thinking itself untouchable, safe behind the waves. But Alexander built a causeway, a massive bridge of rubble, using the ruins of the mainland city itself. Stones, timber, soil cast into the sea, just as Ezekiel foretold 250 years earlier. That causeway still stands today. You can walk on it. Such precision is impossible to ignore. If Ezekiel was right about Tyre, down to the last pebble, could he be right about the Dead Sea? Those fish in those desert pools aren't just a quirk. They might be proof of a promise unfolding, a divine whisper saying, "Pay attention." The prophets didn't stop at rivers. Ezekiel's vision ends with a city restored, reordered, renamed. The Lord is there. It's more than geography. It's God dwelling among his people, close enough to feel. The Dead Sea's awakening, if it's truly beginning, is just a shadow of that greater reality, a teaser trailer for what's to come. Centuries later, the Apostle John, exiled on the rocky island of Patmos, saw a similar vision in Revelation 22, a radiant city with a crystal river flowing from God's throne, trees of life on its banks, their leaves healing the nations, every tribe, every people, water bringing life, God at the center, like a heartbeat. When we see fresh pools forming near the Dead Sea, fish swimming where salt once ruled, it's a reminder God's story moves toward restoration, not ruin. It's a narrative of hope, of redemption winning out.
But the prophets warn restoration is tied to readiness. The question isn't just whether the land is being prepared with these signs popping up like fireworks, but whether the people are. Hearts softened, eyes open. Across Israel, the land is stirring. The Negev blooms with flowers and crops. Ancient springs bubble up. The Jordan shifts. At the Dead Sea, life swims where death reigned. To some, these are random events, nature doing its thing. Through the lens of prophecy, they're a pattern, whispers before a storm. Ezekiel saw it. Zechariah confirmed it. John envisioned its completion. Each sign moves the story closer to the moment when God dwells among his people again. This isn't just about a dying sea, it's a divine clock ticking. Some signs come quietly, like a desert spring. Others will hit like thunder. The question isn't if the story will reach its climax, it will. It's whether we'll recognize it when it does. The Dead Sea's fish are just the beginning. What's next? Hit subscribe, share your thoughts below, and let's find out together.